Welcome to the Savage Worlds GM podcast. I'm your host, Jared Savage Daddy Gunning. Tonight's show brought to you by Roll20.net, the world's largest virtual tabletop. Check them out today at Roll20.net. Follow us on social media. We are at SWGM Podcast on Facebook, SWGM Podcast on Twitter, and also the Patreon page / SWGM Podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe, like, share. YouTube / Savage Worlds GM Podcast. And the same moniker on iTunes, Savage Worlds GM Podcast. If you're watching the show with the live link through YouTube, feel free to participate in the chat, and we will include you in the discussion. Tonight's topic, shoot high, aim low. We're going to start talking about non-standard combat rules in Savage Worlds, and how to get a little more creative with outcomes. Here to discuss it, back from a long hiatus, some call him Jib.
What? How'd we get here?
The obviously very ecstatic Dustin Smith, the Savage Intern. He may have dropped. Dave, the Rules Maven Scott.
Greetings and salutations.
And Chris, the Savage Mommy Fox.
Yeah, Dustin's got this look on his face like, oh, no.
Yeah, I think his camera froze up and everything. It was classic Dustin. Okay, so yep, and he'll be back into the show in a minute. So tonight we're talking about non-standard combat alternatives. So I want to start off the show by talking about a very overlooked a rule in Savage Worlds and a very misunderstood or hardly ever applied. And this is the tiny target called shot. So, if you're familiar with called shots in Savage Worlds, it's basically you pick a body part. Limbs are -2. A headshot is -4. A tiny target is -6 and has its own particular effect depending on what you're targeting. So, let's kind of talk about that. I think the easiest example to do is going to be talking about using the J.R. Tolkien, The Hobbit corollary and Smaug's chink in the armor.
Where is Scott when we need him to have a fit about Tolkien?
It's going to be the easiest analogy. We'll branch out from there, but let's start by talking about that. So, Smaug's flying over Riverdale, and you got one shot at the arrow to get in the chink of the armor. And here's the thing: on a success, Smaug is dead. That's that -6 tiny target. And the outcome is he's dead.
See, and my problem here is, to me, the difference here is, well, yes, I would consider that a -6 to hit that tiny target on the giant dragon body. I wouldn't consider that to be the type of variable effect for the tiny target called shot. In my situation, when I'm looking at that, I read Smaug as a enemy extra who has invulnerable to all weapons except in this one spot. His weakness is that one location. Hitting there, you can do it.
That's a fair cop. I'll give you that. But we're talking in the narrative the way it exists in The Hobbit, right? So he makes the -6 shot, and Smaug dies. But yeah, I agree with what Dave is saying.
I think so. At least for me as a GM, when I'm ruling whether or not something is going to be that tiny target, there's a couple aspects that go into it. One is, I mean, obviously, if you're actually shooting at a tiny target, I want to shoot the bottle cap off of Jib's bottle of beer from across the bar. Tiny target all day long, twice on Sundays. It's really hard to hit a bottle cap. The flip side, though, is there's almost always and I want X to happen. I don't want to roll damage. I just want to blow the bottle cap off. Or, I'm just doing this to prove how good of a gunslinger I am. I want to hit the bottle cap and not the bottle. Kind of a thing. And I think those situations are what that -6 really excels at. Is when the player is trying to achieve something that's not necessarily damage.
So let's try one. Let's say in the adventure, I sneak up behind you with a corded garrote. and I'm going to get the town guard squarely in my grasp in a garrote around his neck and strangle him down to unconsciousness. Is that a called shot head, or are we talking a -6 called shot?
I don't think either one.
Really?
Well, I figured a garrote, I mean, isn't that... I don't know. I mean, to me, that's not a called shot to the head. That would be...
How else am I going to get it around his neck?
A grapple check. And are you going to have the drop on him? I mean... If you have the drop, if you have the drop, I would make it a grapple check.
It's an interesting way to go, and I think one of the great things with Savage Worlds is it leaves so much up to the GM.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a specific rule in Savage Worlds for how to get the drop. There's not a specific rule in Savage Worlds for garrote and how it works. So you can kind of base it on the people you have sitting at your table.
And what you want to have happen.
Well, let's talk about it as a -6 called shot, and what the variable effect would be
On a garrote.
Mm-hmm.
It's -6 called shot, and the variable effect is, I'm going to steal this from what we were talking about in the green room. The variable effect is on a successful attack, they're drowning.
Okay. How do you feel about on a success they're grappled?
Well, I think they're grappled and they're drowning.
Okay.
And
to
I
get
would
the suffocation,
like a corded garrote that you're throwing out there. I can agree with Jib that this is, you know, the effect isn't. I'm not rolling direct damage for this. I'm not doing like a strength plus a D something damage for the garrote as a weapon. I'm subjecting you to the drowning hazard. But the additional effect beyond that I'm requesting from the GM for my called shot is absolutely that I have a grapple on. And I would full on go with the version of grapple now found in Flash Gordon, where the enemy that you've got held like that is absolutely bound and vulnerable.
Okay. We're at medium range on a battlefield, the medieval game. I've got a crossbow. There's a fully armored knight storming at me across the battlefield, and he's got a helmet on that only has, you know, a slit here across and a slit down the middle.
I mean, that's right in the book.
So let's talk about that effect right in the book.
Well, and I don't
tiny target.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the ruling of the book at all. That's it's a tiny target. It's difficult to hit. It gets +4 for being a headshot, and it bypasses all the armor because that's the specific part of the called shot is I'm shooting through the opening in the armor. The problem I have with that example is it's the only one they give.
Right.
That it sets it up that that's the only way that -6 can be used. So to me, it's like that's the most useless example because it's the one that everyone's read, assuming you've read the rules.
So what would another example be?
Well, and that's what we're talking about here is things like the garrote or a smog or, one of my favorite ones, and it didn't get the GM I was playing with at the time didn't rule it this way, but we had the discussion afterward, was the baseball slide under the ward that I did in the Pathfinder game. That is absolutely a tiny target variable effect. I am trying to hit a specific soft location on the belly as I slide under, and when I do so, the effect I'm looking for is for his entrails to drop out. I'm not even really looking for damage at that point. I'm looking to hinder that NPC mount so that it can't be used or it's not willing to move from that location. So the effect is completely disconnected from damage. It just looks like damage in the narrative because it's slit open and its guts fall out.
Right. Could you use it for something like, let's say there's something riding, like let's say we have a rider on a horse. Could you use the same thing as a slide under -6 to basically slice the saddle and require, as the variable effect, require the rider to make an agility roll, not to fall off?
Oh,
Does
I
that
would
make sense?
Even if I gave the rider an agility roll to avoid it, it would be at a heavy minus because the rider is 100% confident in their saddle. So when you cut that thing, the rider is very much going with that saddle.
But what we're saying is, though, the variable effect doesn't have to necessarily be damage.
Right.
True,
right?
But it could be. I mean, you could just say, I want to go for, instead of a called shot leg at -2, I want to go called shot knee. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to argue that I want +6 to my bonus. I want +6 damage instead of the +2 damage for a limb shot. I'm going for a tinier version of the target, and I want more damage. And I could see a player asking for that at the table, and I don't see a reason why you shouldn't give it to them.
What about called shot eye?
Oh, that's gonna give you some major negatives.
With the variable that if it does enough to cause a wound, you now have the 1 eye hindrance?
I'm going to go with not necessarily. And the reason I'm going to say that is because I know to be fact that there have been cases where someone was stabbed in the eye and didn't lose the eye.
And I could see
now, I'm going to give it a possibility of happening, but it's not going to be a guaranteed thing.
I would say if you do enough damage to cause a wound to the victim, there's a chance they could lose the eye. If you do enough damage to force an injury roll, the injury is automatically 1 eye.
Well, I was under the impression that if you do a called shot with gritty damage, then you forego the roll on the injury table. Like you actually get to pick because you're taking the negatives to force it.
No. That's a house rule you've played with Jared and I too much.
Right.
Over and over again. Because we say that it makes no sense to make this roll on the injury table. And okay, I do a called shot to Dustin's left eye, but he takes a wound, spins around, and smacks his leg into the table behind him and breaks his knee. And that's why he ends up with the one-legged hindrance.
Dustin, we have to talk at some point about some of the unfortunate decisions you've made in the past.
Yeah, like playing with Jared and I.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's for the same reason that Dave and I in our games don't require rolls on the fright table. Because, number one, it's a player agency issue. If you fail a fright check in one of our games, you're shaken. And then you decide from your character how you react to that fear. Are you paralyzed? Do you stand there? Do you have an unfortunate, loss of control that requires you to, change soiled pants? What happens? Do you get bravadoed and I'm going to beat you down? It's up to you. I don't like the roll on the fear table for what your reaction to fear is. If it's okay with your players and that's how you want to run your game, that's fine. Run it that way. But we do the same thing with injuries because it just doesn't make sense that, I just shot you, intentionally took the penalty to shoot you in the leg and then have it be a headshot on the injury table. Like, what? No.
I will give you my answer to that equation. And that is that instead of rolling on the injury table, it's, hey, you who just got injured. How did you get injured? What's hurt?
See, and I can see that too. But I would also say that as well as like what we do with the fright table requires that you know your players and have some trust in their role play chops, that they're willing to take that, negative on the character sheet, that hindrance, that, that downside to having gotten in combat rather than just the, I got a bruise on the side of my leg.
I always reserve the right to veto what they come up with.
Yeah.
But again, as you said, I am disgustingly blessed with the players that I have, and I can count on them to come up with something far worse than whatever I was going to give them.
Oh God, yes. If you've got good players, they are always worse to themselves than you would have ever have been. Yeah. So I think there is, though, something to be said for, and Carlin Kendrick called it the JFK magic bullet effect. and I like that terminology. But I think there's something to be said if you are a mediocre improvisational GM, those tables are amazing because they do two things. One, you don't have to necessarily think of something all the time. But two, you do have to come up with a narrative that wraps that together. How did he lose an eye when you shot him in the foot? That is an interesting story that you suddenly have to tell your players.
Steel toe boots and a ricochet.
Although I like that as a story. You know, I like, so how'd that happen?
But I think there's a lot that goes on in combat that we rule through GM fiat without thinking about it.
Sure.
You know,
For example.
So a player tells you, I want to take this toaster and I want to run across the
God damn you, Dave.
Wrap it around the zombie's neck, run up the wall, loop it around the light, and then pull on it and hang the zombie with the toaster. There is no rule in any book that covers that. It could be an agility trick because it requires a lot of agility. It might be an acrobatic maneuver just to do a grapple, you know, substituting acrobatic for grapple. You could rule it 1,000 different ways depending on your players and the GM, but there's not a written rule to handle that shit.
Nope. It could be a dramatic task featuring agility and strength.
Or just go for 3 rounds like a social conflict would. I mean, just with a different action.
Uh-huh.
Well, the most expedient, the way that we would I ended up ruling that when it happened is it's an agility trick.
Yeah.
Because the intention is not to cause a wound or damage, it's to immobilize. It's just a very, how would you say, over the top way of achieving that. So it's this fastest solution is a simple agility trick.
I would definitely say it sounds like in a zombie game, having someone do a smarts tricks against the zombie isn't such a great idea.
Well,
I might even go so far as to say that zombies are immune to smarts tricks.
They are.
Yeah. Like they've got immunization. They're just animal
they have zero intelligence. They will walk into a freaking wood chipper after prey.
They have 0 intelligence. They always fall for smarts tricks. Mm-hmm. You say, "Hey, over here," they turn and walk toward you. Yep. Guaranteed every time. They do not get a roll. If you declare a smarts trick, you win.
Yeah. Well, and it's also too if you're running Romero zombies. By the way, we're not talking Resident Evil zombies. We're not talking 28 days later.
I know Jib now disagrees with me, and that's great because that's the point of what we're kind of talking about tonight is he's free to run it his way. There's not a rule in Savage Worlds that says they have to do X.
Right.
Right.
No, I get why you would do it that way. But the thing is that having it be an auto success, it always works no matter what, makes it too easy.
Yeah, maybe give them animal, like D4 animal intelligence. They can't use it to do anything, but they can do it. They can make that roll to determine whether or not they fall for it.
Right.
Generally speaking, like if any zombie film that I've watched, when people were using the smarts trick, you had to worry about not the zombie you were tricking, but the zombie you didn't see.
Right.
Like the whole get down with the Whisperers is they literally are wearing the skin of the zombies and they bump into other zombies so that they'll turn them in that direction and they lure them on because the zombie is going to check and see if they're a human. Like the whole way Michonne walks around with like the no arms, no jaw zombies is, you know, the zombies don't look at the human there because the other zombies aren't checking her out. So I feel like if you were going to do that, one of the things that I would start doing is I'm like, so you're going to smarts trick one zombie in a horde. That's going to do well against that one zombie, but give me some notice checks to see what's behind you, because part of what makes them dangerous is they're silent, they're quiet, and they just come out of nowhere.
They're just everywhere. They're omnipresent. And here's the thing. You want to talk about a dick move? They just have to drop on you.
Yeah, because they're so quiet. Like if you can get the smart,
they're there.
If you can get the smarts check, if you can get the smarts trick on them with no trouble whatsoever, Why can't they get the drop on you? They can literally just wait in the grass. They don't breathe. They don't make a sound. You step on them and they bite you.
I'm going to go so far as to say it doesn't matter if they're silent or not. You walk up to what you think is a dead body and it bites you. I guarantee it has the drop.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, this is all very academic, and I don't want this to become the zombie episode, but it just all depends on what the rules are in your campaign setting and what your idea of what a zombie should be is.
Well,
I mean,
you shouldn't be going up and poking dead people anyway.
Yeah, I will go on record as saying I absolutely hate fast zombies. I hate them. No, all the no. Why are they in video games and movies? Because that shit's exciting. I get it, but not at my table. They're all drunk shamblers.
At that point, they're not zombies. They're crazies. Like they're just people that have lost their mind.
Be infected.
Yeah, they go from being zombies, which are undead, to being people that are alive but just nuts.
Yeah, you get the 28 days later thing where it's, they've got the rage virus. They're not actually dead.
Yeah.
That's not a zombie movie.
Here's the thing, though. That doesn't make it, just like with the rules we're talking about, it doesn't make it a bad movie or a bad character or even a bad monster to put in your game. It just doesn't fit if what I pitched is Romero zombies, and then I all of a sudden put a running zombie into the game. My players are justifiably going to be pissed.
Yeah, that's going to be a WTF moment at the table. They're going to look at you like, what? Huh? No. Huh? Hold on. That's not the game we signed up to play. What are you doing?
Well, another example of what we're talking about, though, as far as like these non-standard rules. I saw an entire conversation happen, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, where they were talking about barbed arrows. This idea of an arrow that's designed to do as much damage when you take it out as when it was put in you. Okay. And they were talking about, would you have the player take, the same damage roll later on? Would you, is it a penalty to the healing check? And I'm like, here's my version of it, but really it depends on the game you're playing in. And the reason we don't have a rule in core that says this is how you handle barbed arrows is because in a pulp game, that's probably just when you go out of combat, that arrow is appropriately removed. And if, you're in a gritty game, more than likely you're going to have an actual healing roll that takes place as they take you out to a surgeon and have surgery occur to remove that barbed arrow. So it depends on the type of game you're playing in. So some of these things, we can't have a hard and fast rule. We need things like that -6 called shot to do this thing and then let the GM decide what the effects are. We need the ability for the GM to just decide on the fly. That's an agility trick.
Right. Well, and also to use the barbed arrow example, the GM could just decide, when you go to pull it out, it does D4 damage.
I mean, why not just have a vigor check to see if it doesn't? Like to see if you can soak the damage from it coming out of just that D4 or a D6.
Right. Or it adds an extra -1 to healing checks. Like Dave was saying, whatever you want to apply that makes sense and is easy for you works.
I mean,
what I would do with a barbed arrow is pulling the barbed arrow automatically does 1 wound. Period.
Ouch.
Yeah,
But again, there's a level of, I want to say, verisimilitude and grittiness to that answer that maybe doesn't fit in some games, whereas it absolutely does in others.
All right. What about maybe? So here's the thing. An arrow is really just a bolt, so why not just add trappings? Or, maybe now the new power modifiers. Huh?
Don't even get me started.
I'm just saying trappings in effect. I mean, what happens, it's like the trapping is barbed arrow. The effect is in removed, vigor roll to prevent damage.
Or how about this? It does +1 damage because it's barbed.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so I wasn't going to reveal this for a bit. There's a project I'm working on. And one of the things I've added is exactly what you're talking about, is effects, an effects table that you can apply to weapons. Here's your basic weapons list. And then I put in there, like, you can make a weapon light, and it's minus 10% weight, but it also does minus 1 damage. This is the equivalent of the light pistol in the sci-fi companion. And then I put in a modifier for heavy, and it's now 10% heavier and does plus 1 damage. And that sort of thing. One of the interesting ones I added is vicious. This is a weapon designed to do cruel wounds. Barbed arrows, dum-dum ammunition, serrated knives. And it gives a
Barbed baseball bat.
It does a -1 to all soak rolls and healing checks for that wound.
Yeah.
Sense.
I mean, it can. Here's the thing with Savage Worlds: it can be as complicated, as intricate as you want it to be. It can be as nasty as you want it to be. It can be as simple as you want it to be. The point is, it's all about FFF, fast, furious, fun. Find the easiest way for you to pull that off
for your group,
group and your game. And it's here's the thing, because we talk about this a lot. I'm going to touch on it again real quick. It's all about what's the tone of your game. Turn the dials appropriately to get the setting rules and everything to match the tone of your game. If you don't care about called shots, don't do any extra. If you want them to do extra damage, they just do extra damage, and that's it. That's all the verisimilitude you want to apply to it. Fine.
They have
it's great.
A -4 and a -6 that just give +2, +4, +6, and move on.
Right.
We don't have to call it a limb shot, a head shot, and a vitals shot. We can just call it -2, -4, -6, and move on if that's what you're looking for.
Right. And that's like, for example, that's why if you take a look at Savage World setting rules, gritty damage basically says, hey, anytime you take a wound, roll on the injury table, that lasts until the combat is over, until the encounter is over. It just adds a little layer of more grit to a combat, makes combat a little more difficult because now, shit. Crap, my vigor just dropped a die type. Now I got to recalculate my toughness.
Not only are you at a -1 for the wound, you're now rolling a lower die type for vigor on top of that.
Yeah, to soak. It lowers your toughness. It makes things more complicated. It makes combat more dangerous. And if that's what you're looking for, there's a very simple setting rule you can apply to make it happen. But back to non-standard combat. So, I think we've pretty much touched on the tiny called shot rule. What about Indiana Jones whip?
It's a flail.
There's nothing in there for whips.
It's a flail. It's
Why?
a flail.
No, I don't want to use a flail. That's not a whip.
Why is a flail not a whip?
Because it says flail.
All right.
But you could use the whip as a prototype for it and add a couple of attributes to it, like, I don't know, reek and entangle, and ta-da, there you go. You have a whip. Enjoy.
Yeah,
have a nice day.
It's an automatic entangle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So could I use my whip to disarm somebody?
Yes. Yes.
Not only could you do it, you could do it at reach 1.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Exactly.
And with some cool theme music backing you up.
Right. The thing to remember, the thing often overlooked is when a weapon has a reach of 1, it reduces your parry by 1 usually.
Well, let's be fair. The interesting aspect with that is it's not as easy as people think. Because disarm in Savage Worlds, which I almost never see a player use, is you roll damage and then they make a strength check against the damage value to continue holding on to it. Well, if you've got, a D6 strength and a D4 whip, you're not setting a very high target number, but it could be high enough.
Could happen.
Right. Well, here's the thing too. What if I don't want to do damage with the whip, but I want to basically cause a distraction with the whip and cause you to lose your turn? Agility trick?
Agility trick. That's what I would say an agility trick in that case.
I might even say it's an agility trick with a bonus based on having an implement to do with it. Just like they have the rule that if you wave a big gun in somebody's face when doing an intimidation, you get +2. You might get +2 on the agility trick for having the whip that is a, utensil designed for that type of a action.
I'm going to be honest with you. One of the things about the whip that makes it good for a trick is the crack Like that's how a bullwhip works. Is it makes this like thunderclap next to the animal and it scares it. So yeah, you probably should get like a +2 bonus for that, just because. Maybe you use it for intimidation, not necessarily a fighting roll.
Right. Yeah, it gives you +2 to intimidation when you crack the whip at their feet.
Yeah.
Makes them think twice about coming at you. Whoa, wait a minute.
Right. I mean, if that thing's going to scare a bull, I wonder what it's going to do to a human.
Yeah, well, if you don't shake them, then they just pull out a
depends.
gun and shoot you.
It depends on whether the human is a player character or not. Because if they're a player character, it's not going to have any effect on them because they're not going to fall for that.
Right.
Just ask them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how many player characters do you know who ever roleplay their character as being afraid in the situation?
Exactly.
Jim excluded with his wonderful players.
We're the heroes. We're not scared of anything.
You know, it is the one problem with what Jared and I do with the Fright Table is you have to have players who are on board with the idea of role playing a character that gets scared, of playing a multifaceted character. So that is just absolutely one of those issues that you run into that, it's just a common thing in the hobby. You kind of get used to it.
Right. So since we brought up the whip, one of the things that just kind of shocked me was the other day someone said, how do I make a nunchuck?
It's a club.
It's a flail. No, literally.
It's a flail.
It is. It is a rice
the weapon
flail.
got its origin. It was a grain flail.
The thing about it, all right, seriously.
But Dustin, it doesn't say nunchucks in the book. I'm looking at the weapons. It doesn't say nunchucks.
All right, I'll show you a trick.
What about a khopesh?
Mark through flail and write nunchuck next to it.
Yeah, fuck your nunchucks. What about a khopesh? I need a khopesh.
Describe a khopesh.
That curved sword.
The curved sword? You mean like a scimitar or maybe a long sword?
No, I don't mean a scimitar. I mean a khopesh.
A khopesh. You mean like maybe a rapier or a short sword?
Oh well, wait a minute. What about a kakuri? I need a kakuri.
You mean like
it's a short sword.
It's a short sword. Yeah.
Like the badass chick in Resident Evil where she like pulls them out and she's double wielding with that hooked short sword.
Yeah,
the kakuris.
Or a dagger, maybe. Like it's just aesthetics. Like, oh my gosh, anybody with a science background.
Fucking kukri. I'm sorry.
Kukri, sorry.
Oh shit.
Scimitar, and
It's a simple machine. It's a wedge. You apply force. It separates things.
Oh, we're off the rails tonight.
You got strength D4, strength D6, strength D8, and help me if it's like one of those ogre-sized weapons, strength D10.
Okay, but all right. So I'm playing Kill Bill Volume 2, and I have my NPC is that the Asian schoolgirl with the sadistic edge on her. So I need her weapon. I don't know where to find that in Savage Worlds.
Okay. You mean you don't? It's a flail. It really is a flail.
We see
the reach one.
Same fucking thing. Same fucking thing.
Go out there, buy Iron Dynasty. Iron Dynasty's got all those weapons in it.
Like seriously,
give me your Savage Worlds books because you don't get to play anymore. Go play L5R or something.
At this point, this is just the melee version of Jared's go to the guns and cross out everything that doesn't do 2d6.
And has a range of 12, 24, 48.
I am literally on the weapons list, and I'm looking at pole arms, and halberd, lance, and pike are all strength plus D8.
Yeah, of course they are.
Requires two hands. One, you just change up. Does it have AP? Does it have reach? That's all.
Right. So, and we went down this bunny trail. It seems like it was a tangent. It's not a tangent. It's intentional. I just want to drive home to anybody who's new to Savage Worlds. There's this thing called trappings. We don't care what something looks like. We only care what the mechanical effect is in Savage Worlds.
Right.
So find the most similar object that matches what you're trying to put in the game and just call it that.
So pick one. Pick one that you like. Pick one that has the effect on the game that you like and call it what the fuck you want.
If you were to break into the Sci-Fi Companion, all right, there's a little section where they actually break down vibro weapons, chain weapons, power weapons, and they literally tell you to take one of the weapons from the core book and just apply this, and it just changes the stats. That's how it works. If you wonder what some kind of weapon, where is this in the book? Where do I find my weaponized Tamagotchi? I mean, it's in there.
It can't be that easy, Dustin.
Weaponized Tamagotchi.
It can't be that easy.
Advanced is doing the basics well.
So wait, let's go down this stream for 1 second. So, poisoned daggers as a non-standard combat, because I never see anybody use poisonous darts.
Do you know why?
Poison daggers.
Do you really
they
know
have to go
why?
because they have to go to the book and look and see what the poison does, and they don't want to?
There's not a GM in the world who's going to arm his player characters with poison once you look at the rules for poison in Savage Worlds. Every form of poison either paralysis or kills you. There is no, it does a little extra damage. It's all, you're dead real quick, or you're paralyzed.
Or you're dead and you can't fucking move.
Yeah, I mean, poison is no joke in Savage Worlds. I think that it's one of those places that probably needs some bolstering in Savage Worlds Black, if you're listening, Clint. We could use some, hey, this just adds an extra die 6 of damage over the next 4 rounds or something similar like in Flame. But let's just be honest here for a second. That's a big part of why poison doesn't come up in Savage Worlds much, is because, quite frankly, the rules on it are vercocked.
Okay, so how would we extend that? I mean, let's talk about it. We're not going to make it lethal, but we're going to make it interesting. Like the poison that I just stuck you with, there is a remedy. There is a antitoxin, Dr. Jones.
We'll see, and I mean that one at least it does exist in Savage Worlds. You're dead in, you roll a couple dice, minutes. Okay, well, dance around on the dance floor with all that ice and see if you can find the antitoxin and the diamond.
It could be a simple knockout poison too, right? That just basically renders you unconscious.
Poison in there as well.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your thought, Dave. What were you about to say before I talked about poison envenomed blades?
Well, I was just going to say there is a part of this discussion we've gotten off on trappings. I think there is a part of this discussion that needs to be had with the licensees and maybe even with PEG, that we don't need settings to emulate core. We need settings to be settings. We see a lot of settings come out, and here's this bolt power, and it's in their setting book exactly the same way it is in core, and it's even still named bolt. Unless your player character has the ability to create on the fly their own trapping and effect the way they do in core, in the setting, it doesn't need an undefined trapping. We need more good examples of trappings in the material that's out there to help guide players and GMs with a jumping off point. Because right now, let's be blunt, the section on trappings, probably one of the least understood sections of the book. And,
I agree.
And the effects, no one uses.
So I have to bring something up, Dave, and this is just something that kind of drives me nuts, and I've noticed. Like that discourse we had a minute ago about the aesthetics versus the mechanics of weapons. And yet, when people are new to Savage Worlds, when I have new players come in and they breeze past the trapping settings, they think trappings are just aesthetics. but trappings actually have a change to the effects. And then when they go back later on and they're looking, they're like, oh, wait a second, I can restart somebody's heart with electricity. I can cause prolonged damage with fire. I can melt somebody's armor over time with acid. I can do that with trappings. And I'm like, yes, it's not just aesthetics.
Well, and Flash Gordon is a step in the right direction with the power modifiers. We don't know if that's going to land in Savage Worlds Black. It wasn't in the section of updates to core. It was in the power section for Flash Gordon.
Right.
So it's a step in the direction, but I still don't think even that goes far enough.
I'll give you a great example. So anybody who wants to pick up Deadlands Reloaded and look at the Chi Mastery powers, Bolt is trapped as you reach into your pocket and you pull out tiny polished pearls or rocks and you fling them because you're a martial arts master.
Mm-hmm.
And it does the exact same thing as the Bolt power. In Savage Worlds Core.
Has all of the powers in Deadlands Reloaded have a trapping based on the arcane background they're associated with. We need more of that to give players examples to jump off of. Now, I know Jib runs a lot of Deadlands, and he doesn't make people use those trappings. That's his choice for his world. But in Deadlands, when a huckster uses Bolt, it's supposed to work the way it is in the book. Not, you can pull your gun and shoot, or open your mouth and shoot out bees, or the laser beams out of your eyes, or you turn around and drop your trousers and fart out, pellets of fire that shoot across the world and burn people to death.
Right, and actually the hucksters is what? Flying cards from his deck?
Yeah, throw the card at you.
Yeah.
And again, that's rules as written, but again, we come back to this idea. As a GM, it's your choice. As a licensee, it's your choice whether or not your setting has a specific trapping or is still going to have that openness to have them do it. But we need more licensees to release stuff like Deadlands that has here's the trapping, here's what it looks like, here's the effect it has in-game that's outside of what core does. Because once we have more of that, people will have a leg to stand on when they create their own.
Uh-huh.
One of the things about the power modifiers that I'm noticing is that it looks like it's dancing kind of close to the Superpowers companion.
Oh, it's a direct step from what they did with Superpowers Companion 2.0.
I gotta tell you, if you're ever wondering, the Superpowers Companion is the code behind the Matrix. It's pretty much like the operating system, and the deluxe edition is MS-DOS, and it's written over top of it. You can break it down that most Savage Worlds are like just below the pulp section. In fact, if you want to go to it, pulp is probably seasoned, and I think seasoned is where you actually start gameplay, where you finally get the hang and you sort of gel together. But yeah, that it looks to be that's the direction it's moving, is we are getting closer to the Superpowers 2.0 methodology.
Well, and I said it at the time that I thought Superpowers 2.0 added a lot of concepts to Savage Worlds that were absolutely amazing. I just didn't agree with some of the ways they went about implementing them, because I feel like the Superpowers Companion adds a lot of inflationary math to the game that was just unnecessary and uncalled for. The concepts are great. It's just once I get to a point where I'm rolling like 3d12 plus 2d6 because I've bought all these modifications, at that point it's just too much math to keep the game fast and furious for me.
Right. It breaks apart some of the rules. It's like some of the boundaries that Deluxe has that makes it more fun. I think if you have like a box to play in, and the Superpowers Companion stretches it out further, and if Savage Worlds Black is going the route with the power modifiers like in Flash Gordon, then I think we're getting to that point where we are sort of embracing the concept of the box is sort of getting bigger. I could almost foresee them taking the arcane background superpowers in Savage Worlds Black and making it sort of the pulp level or sub pulp. Like you would have to take more hindrances in order to play a superhero.
The street level, pulp level that they had in Superpowers Companion. I could see that to a certain extent, but at the same time, I don't know if I agree that they would do that in Black. That said, we're kind of off in the weeds again. So what about this for the non-standard combat is, okay, so I'm going to have this weapon, and let's call it, a smoke grenade. And what I want it to do is I throw it out there, and it casts the obfuscate power. But we're playing in a modern-day military game. There are no powers.
Yes.
But by way of my delivery method is a smoke grenade, and it's simply the obfuscate power.
It works just like a weird science device. If you think of a weird science device,
obfuscate. Were we playing vampire? You mean conceal, right?
Obscure.
Okay.
Right. So it's
literally conceal arcana, Jared. Not and obscure is the one that deals with light.
Okay.
All right. I've been looking through Triple Ace Games book Necropolis, and they have this idea in there that anything that you can't conceptualize, anything that you need is a power treated as a weird science device. So yeah, smoke grenade is nothing more than the power obscure, because that's the end goal.
Well, see, and
it could be blind. You could also make it blind or confusion. I mean, there's a number of ways you could go, but the idea is sound. Apply a powers effect.
That's where you go, like the flashbang and that. I think there's also an interesting aspect that if your player tells you that his weird science character in a modern day game who's making, alien artifact composite weapons, if that player tells you he's making a grenade he throws in and it does the obscure power, you tell him no, and you hand him 500 credits worth of smoke grenades that do exactly that, because Weird Science specifically says that the Weird Science devices should do more than current technology is capable of. That Weird Science shouldn't be used to just replace technology that actually exists in a game where Weird Science is a arcane background.
Right. So let's give an example of that. So I'm a weird scientist and I create a mimic grenade. So when I toss it and it goes off, everybody caught inside it looks exactly the same as the person, as one target in there.
Okay.
That's
weird disguise power.
Non-standard combat. I'll give you that.
Okay, so you use the description of the disguise power, and ta-da, carry on.
Right, and now it's got a area of effect.
Yeah.
Trapping or effect, and I'm done. So when it goes off, the grenade drops, and I pick one target for that grenade to turn everybody into in that appearance, and boom, they look identical.
When you make your dice roll to throw the thing, determines whether or not it's that target, because it's your successful roll. The grenade is going off.
Right.
You throw that thing out there. There's a large verse template or medium verse template of people who are all going to look like a specific target, and your roll to hit them determines whether or not it's him, or if you accidentally roll it over and hit the guy next to him, and now they all look like that dude.
Right. Yeah, so I mean that would be what we're talking about. We're talking about come up with a very unique, it's weird science. It's called weird science for a reason. It's a doppelganger explosive device. Call it whatever you want, but don't just call it disguise.
Right.
Oh, there we go again with and when it gets to your record sheet, it should not be named the same thing it's named in the book.
Right. It should say doppelganger grenade, parentheses, disguise, parentheses.
Fair, I'm going to go so far as to say, unless you're playing in medieval Europe, that's true of short sword, long sword, lance. Yep. Those things aren't named that in wherever you're playing. They've got specific names. Your players should be writing that down on their character sheet.
Right. Like Kakuri.
I call my long sword Steve.
My weaponized Tamagotchi creates the confusion power.
Who touched my gun?
How about this? A grenade that you drop and it summons spiders as a swarm.
Yep.
Sure.
I actually was
that's
in
ridiculous.
I was in a
swarms. I want to talk real quick about swarms. Sorry, Dustin.
Oh, that's okay.
Anybody who's not familiar with what swarms do in Savage Worlds, guess what? In a medium burst template, small burst, or large burst, they automatically do 2d6 every round damage. There's no fighting roll. 2d6 damage every round you're standing in that area of effect where the swarm is. Whether that's rats, bees, spiders, whatever.
Bees. That's some scary shit, man.
Wolverines. A swarm of Wolverines.
Swarm of Wolverines. A swarm of sloths. Oh my god, you're attacked by a swarm of sloths.
Back away very slowly.
All right, maybe they'll accept you as one of their own.
Right. So if you want to do the Trojan horse thing, smart trick. Smart trick. Or you can do, stealth versus notice. Hiding inside the Trojan horse when you rolled up to the gates.
I'm actually excited to think about how thievery is going to factor into things.
Okay. Hold on. I don't want to talk about. I don't want it tonight. I don't want to talk about black.
Gotcha.
Let's have a whole show dedicated to
Pen
black.
and that. Gotcha.
I think our show for Black needs to wait until the full version of Black
Right. Till everything's released.
Available, and we can talk about what actually makes it in. Because here's the thing: even the stuff that's in Savage Worlds, the Savage World of Flash Gordon or whatever that says these are updates to core, they're not updates to core until such a time as
when they're officially updates to core. Yeah. No, it'll be interesting. I would love to have the conversation, but we've circled back on it 4 times already in this conversation. So I don't want to talk about.
My apologies.
And I'm not saying people shouldn't use those rules at their table and incorporate the new status effects and stuff like that. I'm just saying we can't comment on it as a final thing until we have a final version in our hands. Because let's be honest. PEG could change their mind on any one of those things, and it ends up not being a rule.
Well, not only that, not everybody has access to what we're talking about either, unless you bought the Flash, unless you took advantage of the Flash Gordon Kickstarter. So,
but not everybody has access to Savage Worlds Deluxe Explorer Edition either. We talk about that all the time. So,
well, if you shouldn't poo-poo on you, spend the $9. I mean, damn.
It's a good investment. I think you'll like it. How have you endured the podcast this long?
Yeah, if you don't have core rules, why are you listening to us?
Right.
Well, they can have core rules.
You don't even need to preface it with if you don't have core rules. It's just, why are you listening to us?
Right. I think it's our charming good looks.
Why are you listening to us? Should be there even if you have core rules.
Well, that's true.
Extent.
That's true. I mean, we should have a disclaimer at the top of the show that if you listen to the show or subscribe regularly, you should be under the care of a licensed physician psychologist for being a subscriber.
It's true.
So, what about I want to kind of talk about the GM approach to non-standard combat. Why is the default go-to always a wild card NPC? Why isn't it geography, bad weather, terrain hazards, fire? Oh, you come across this huge gorge the size of the Grand Canyon with a rickety rope bridge.
So do you want my honest opinion or do you want my PC opinion?
Well, whichever one you think you can sell better, go for it.
Because there's a lot of lazy fucks playing this goddamn game. The major selling point of Savage Worlds to a lot of people is low prep time. You don't have to, have a lot of time to get your game together and ready.
Right.
So I sit down and I go, oh, and here's an ogre right out of the book. I don't have to change its stats. Maybe I tell you that it's green and instead it's a troll, but fuck it, it's got ogre stats, and I'm just dropping.
Right. Okay. Well, that's fair. But that's fair. But then I'm also going to end up using that in combat and using the rules for combat, wounds, all of that. A rickety rope bridge across the canyon 100 feet up in the air, a lot easier.
To you.
Well,
again, How do you rule? Is that difficult terrain? Does it require agility checks? Is it a mobile thing so it's unsteady hands? Those are all questions that as a GM you have to decide for that scene in the moment. And if you're one of the 5 of us, or I would say more than half the people listening to this podcast, that's not a problem for you. But there's a lot of lazy fucks in the community who don't want to do that, and they post on Facebook or Google Plus or the forum saying, what are the rules for fighting in the middle of a rickety bridge? Because my players decided to do that, and I just ended the game last week so I could ask this questions. Because I don't know what to do with my game next week because there's no rules in the book.
It's a negative unstable platform penalty fight.
It's like,
I mean,
go peruse Facebook and Google Plus.
Wow.
Tell me I'm
okay,
wrong.
well, let me say why I'm positing this as an opportunity, maybe a challenge to GMs. Instead of, oh, look, it's a wild card ogre. Oh, look, it's a wild card orc. Oh, look, it's a wild card identical copy of the PCs that I'm facing. Go ahead and present them with a treacherous, narrow pass or bridge, because it's unstable platform, you can make that a dramatic task just to cross it at the -2 penalty for standard dramatic task, plus another -1 or -2 for it being a rickety, rough terrain rope bridge.
-2 for every additional PC who's on the bridge.
Yes, or maybe -1 because it's causing it to sway. And then here's the thing: either they get to the other side, or they plummet 100 feet, 10 stories, 10d6 plus 10.
I wouldn't even go that far. If they fail, if they fail the dramatic task across the bridge snaps, and in Indiana Jones style, they're all slammed into the wall, 1 level of bumps and bruises. Next scene is them fighting while everybody's holding on to the remnants of the bridge.
Yeah.
Why does everything have to be a pass, fail? Oh, look, you failed. Slam you with dice. We just talked about this last week of, failure needs to be more interesting. This comes into it too. Non-standard combat should be the effects of failed dice rolls should be these non-standard things happening to the player characters.
Right. I would just say do interesting things with terrain, and because that could be bad weather. Inclement weather while you're, not to belabor the point, but Frodo and party, god damn, that's some long walks through marshes and bitter cold.
I'm going to be honest with you. The closest I've had for character death, like the time where I felt like I was absolutely screwed, the GM was having us move through frozen terrain. So it's what's the word? It's the terrain is -2. It's rough terrain.
Rough terrain.
Rough terrain. So reduce pace, and we had to make vigor checks at -2. Take levels of fatigue. Try to survive, and everybody's a combat wombat, so nobody took anything in survival. Yep. The one player that was able to get a fire going saved us all just by having a fire going to keep us from freezing to death.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things, because we get hung up in this grand adventure, we don't ever think that, if you look at classic warfare, more people died of dysentery and trench foot than they did of bullets.
Well, it's just more interesting. Here's the other thing too. The reason I posit that, it's more interesting for the player characters and the characters to deal with, because there's not an enemy you can cut down. Right. It's something you have to endure. And then if you want to be a real dick GM, if they don't build a fire, or if they do, hey, look, here come wolves.
Yeah. Well, the wolves actually would be turned away by the fire. You would be eaten by the wolves if you freeze to death. That's a
treacherous pass across, like Dave said, that slams you against the other side of a rock canyon wall. You got a level of fatigue from bumps and bruises. Now start climbing.
Okay, but I think it's more than just have them face hazards. Have them face hazards during combat.
Oh, as well, absolutely.
That rope bridge that we talked about is filled with enemy extras that they're gonna just cleave through normally, but now the rope bridge makes that a little more difficult. You don't need a wild card to challenge them. Doesn't need to be the Balrog and thou shalt not pass. It can be the rickety fucking bridge full of Mularam and his
right.
Thuggy.
Or it could be orc archers on the other side of the canyon shooting at you now that you're trying to climb up. All right.
Yep.
Well, and I think there's another aspect to this that, at least to me, is very interesting, is we are over indulging players' combat skill rolls to the point they're not taking tracking, survival, climbing, swimming, because we don't present that challenge. If you never present me a situation in which I need a Phillips head screwdriver, then the only screwdriver I'm going to own is a standard. Mm-hmm. If you never present me a situation where I need metric tools, I'm only going to own Imperial. You have to put them in a situation where there's a challenge that needs that if you want your players to use it.
Right. There's drama. I think what we're all saying essentially is there's drama and conflict to be found in non-combat.
Right.
And that's just as dramatic and interesting part of a story as a, duel in the streets against the big bad.
And if you're really struggling to get that into the game, I'm saying, we're not talking about looking at products, but I'm going to throw a product out there. Go to Triple Ace Games and get their Perilous Places.
Yep.
Because that's exactly what we're talking about. They have all that. They have how do you run a chase across the rooftops? How do you do these types of things? And it's a good supplement.
Right. Well, and if you look at classic literature, like, a lot of the Greek epic poems or epic, literature of heroes and things of that nature. If you want some good inspiration, I'm going to recommend something off Netflix. It's a 5-episode miniseries documentary called Myths and Legends, I believe. And it talks about Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. It talks about the Iliad, Homer's, is it the Iliad?
The Iliad and the Odyssey.
Yeah, the Odyssey. And a lot of that is just the heroes like at sea trying to survive a storm and wash up on an island that's got a Cyclops on it who starts eating the crew. Like, okay, all right, now it's gonna capture you and enslave you. It's not gonna eat you. It's already got my full of people I'm gonna eat. Now I'm gonna enslave everybody. And now you're gonna break rocks for me. And then now you're setting up a way for them to escape. It's just
I would have the Cyclops sit them down and just be like, I'm so lonely. Please talk with me about my feelings.
the freaking movie version of The Hobbit scene with the trolls where you've got them interrogating the Hobbit on how to cook his dwarfinalis.
Right. I don't want to tell you how to do your job, but you're doing it all wrong. What?
Now that is a smarts check.
They are infested with parasites.
You seen their beards?
Yeah, and you could end that with a persuasion check at the end. I mean, it doesn't have to come down to, okay, I defeated everybody with the swinging of a sword.
Right.
Oh no. What just popped up in chat, Dave?
Please talk to me about agency and immersion. I'm just a sad Cyclops.
I need Cyclops therapy.
Long podcast. That's the RPG Brewery. Hi, Jamie. Well, an interesting aspect of this too is we're talking about non-standard combat. There's a lot more options for non-standard combat when you throw in the hazards. Mm-hmm. Unless you're underwater, you can't have the combat maneuver of reaching over and pulling the regulator out of their mouth.
Right.
Slashing at their gear and cutting the hose to their oxygen tank in space. Well, unless you're in space, there's no reason to have that. There's a lot of aspect of go with these hazardous and non-standard locales, and more non-standard combat will come. You're not going to have a player say, well, I picked the guy up and throw him into the chasm unless you put him above a chasm.
Right. Yeah, instead of just being a vanilla battlefield that's all obviously manicured lawn and leveled and no bumps, no rocks anywhere, no trees anywhere, no trees, no wildlife. You're just, I don't know, fighting in, I don't know, the holodeck where everything is just perfect and you're just trading blows. No, that's not dramatic.
No, a manicured lawn can be extremely dramatic and frightening. I just like to put that out there.
Well,
is that right?
If John Stamos is...
yeah, exactly. Especially if some weird, crazy man comes out and waves at you.
Okay, I'm going to say it. I've said it once. I'm going to say it again. Nothing bad was going to happen. I swear, on a stack of Bibles, nothing bad was going to happen.
My head went a completely different direction. There's that movie from years ago about the future where they're all with special abilities or something, and the lawn was all razor blades. All the grass was actual razor blades.
I would thought that maybe Chris was talking about the possibility of stumbling over a pink flamingo or a garden gnome, and ending up prone accidentally. No, it's a point well taken, Chris. I guess I stand corrected. Manicured lawns, great hazardous battlefield. Absolutely use that. Oh shit! You turn around, trip over the garden gnome. Give me a agility roll to stay on your feet.
And the garden gnome with its pointy, spiky helmet goes right through your throat.
I would say that that's an interesting situation because a garden gnome as a construct, like maybe use stats for a cat, like the size differentiate, and just give it a hidden weapon. Like you're just walking along and roll me notice. Okay, it got the drop on you.
No, oh, even better, a swarm of cats. Because you're fighting on the manicured lawn of the crazy old cat lady who lives down the street.
Okay,
the doors open and a swarm of cats come out, kittens.
You want to talk non-standard combat? What happens when she comes out swinging a cat by the tail and lets it fly at you? What kind of an attack is that?
It's a flail.
No, it's a throwing roll. It's an improvised weapon.
Okay, I think we've run this podcast as far as it's going to go tonight.
It's done.
You're going to put the brakes on it? Okay, but what if you build a large wooden badger?
Okay.
Oh, maybe it's the painkillers and the muscle that cause this.
Or no, you can do the rabbit thing. It's a cat, but it's a wild card, so it's got 3 wounds.
Right. I mean, give it an arcane background.
Pointy teeth. And it automatically causes a -2 fear check.
Right.
All right. Anything else to read from the live stream, the chat? Anything else we want to address?
The answer to your question, Carlin, is it's a -6 because you did the called shot tiny target for throwing the cat at the person's eye. There you go.
All right. Well, until next time, this is Jared, Savage Daddy Gunning, for Jib, Dustin, Dave, and Chris saying keep rolling, stay savage.